name is Gerry Vaisey. The show is I Can't Write Right. And today we're having a little twist. This is Anna. She's going to interview me because I just wrote a book. And by the way, how is your book coming? Because everybody should be having a book. Anna, I guess, is doing a book as well. And she's in a group with me called the Writers Medley. And Anna,
It's coming along. Mine's more a collection of short stories around a set group of characters, whereas Zyzie is a long-term haul, as I understand. First Book of Zyzie. Who or what is Zyzie?
Zyzie is a primate with sort of reddish-orange hair, and she escapes from her caretaker coming out of Burlington, and the reason she escaped is because she was carrying contraband into Canada because she's not human. She can just cross the border if she wants. And this group was trying to take her contraband from her, which she had swallowed, so they were going to just open her up and take it, right? So she didn't like that idea. So there's a big knife fight down there, and then there's a whole bunch of motorcycle chases through all sorts of Franklin County and through Canada up in the woods by Presque Isle, and then the adventure really gets going. So,
Okay, how did you come up with Zyzie?
well, everybody around here sees squirrels. Now, squirrels have 4 hands. So I was thinking about, gee, I wish I had 4 hands. So that's how the book was conceived. And Zyzie, the word Zyzie is about as far down as you can get and still make a name out of it, because the first ones of the primates was AAAA because it was the first one, and then the second one was AAAB. So by the time they got down to Zyzie, they came up with a pretty good primate. She's a mixture of a lot of DNA from various things, and including human DNA, so that she can pass as a human.
Okay, where did Zyzie come from in your imagination?
That's where it came from.
Okay. Did she, I know some authors say that they have characters sort of quote unquote present themselves. Hi, my name is Joe type thing. Write my story. Is that what happened with you and Zyzie, or was it a little more?
A little more than that.
Thought out.
As you know, I'm not young. I'm not a spring chicken. And I heard that if you use one side of your mind all the time, when you get older, if you use the other side of your mind, for example, I was an accountant, so I needed to go into something in fantasy to turn on the other side of my mind. And so that's where the idea of writing a book came from. So first it started, this was the first book that I wrote, and it was terrible. I mean, I didn't describe things very well. And thanks to you guys in the writers group, I started saying, oh, maybe I should do this or do that. And then I took a college course, and then I wrote this book, which is the same story, only with more detail and a lot more excitement and a lot of things like that. And it's the first of 6 books that I'm writing. They're all in a series. This is the first one, and then it just keeps going on from there until they try to repopulate Earth after the apocalypse.
Now, Zyzie is a primate, and you've talked about how eventually they're all supposed to launch into space. And no disrespect to your age, but you lived through the space race.
Yes.
Is that part of where this came from?
I've read a lot of science fiction, and also I said, how are they going to put humans in outer space, like Noah's Ark or something like that? There's just not a lot of room in a spaceship. So I came up with the idea of they needed something, because all humans were going to, on the face of the earth, were going to become extinct. they needed some way of transporting a large amount of people. So they went around and in a lot of these clinics, they have fertilized eggs that they were going to throw away and other things. And even humans that just had begun to form. Now you can put an awful lot of those in a spaceship. So they rescued the ones that were going to be thrown away, and they needed something to surrogate them that wasn't human. So the reason they had to add DNA to, and it was actually they started out with an orangutan, was so that it could surrogate human. And in the book, that happens three times on Earth. There's a real good adventure there where one of the real bad guys and his wife want twins, but she can't do that. So anyway, you're going to have to see how that comes out by reading the book.
Well, in Writers Group, I remember you distributed this one. I still have that copy, and I remember reading through it, and there was a lot in there.
Oh, yes.
But as you said, you kind of cleaned it up, pulled it together, tuned it up for the second edition.
Yes, especially when it first starts out going into the knife fight and going down the wrong direction, going north on the southbound lane of the interstate at over 100 miles an hour. I got a little more descriptive in some of that. Thinking about, oh gee, what's it going to look like with traffic coming at me at, I don't know anybody that drives the interstate at 65, especially truckers, and then I'm going 100 miles an hour in the other direction. What is that going to look like? And,
that would definitely be an adventure because, as you say, Zyzie and her caretaker are on motorcycles.
yes.
I have friends who ride motorcycles, and they say that, you know, their worst enemy is the cars.
Yes, definitely. And her caretaker has a great big Harley, and she has a little KLR 650, and he goes one way to delete everybody off, and she goes the other way. So she can't go up the interstate without getting caught in a hurry, so she crosses the median and goes north on the southbound lane. If they catch her, she's going to die anyway, so, you know, it's quicker if you get hit by a tractor trailer head on at 170 mile an hour closing rate. You know, but anyway, she escapes and goes into a lot of adventures. Some of them were not even in the first book.
What was your inspiration for some of the things Zyzie can do? Obviously, she was bred as a surrogate mother, but you've mentioned drawing from a lot of popular culture things.
Yes, one of the things, if you watch the TV shows, they have this one show where they have a contest to people who go through all these various things like Ninja Warrior, and then there was one Spartan thing where people do amazing things. There's one lady, Steffi Graf, who can do amazing things on some of these challenges that they have. And then there was another, Megan Martin, who was almost, but Megan Martin is a very pleasant person. If you watch her in the background, she's a really pleasant person. So I kind of picked that personality for Zyzie, where tough and competent, but nice. And but the ones that try to attack her don't think she's as nice as the people that are her friends. Something about if you attack somebody with a knife, they get a little hostile towards you. I don't know.
Yeah, you'll have that. So this is the first. There's 5 more
right.
coming
The
up.
second one, I'm a third of the way through. And they're going to try to set up an observation post on the far side of the moon. Now, because these aren't humans, human beings send dogs into death situations in wartime, and they've set other creatures in spaceships and that where they probably aren't going to come back. The Sputnik ones, they came back, but when they set somebody on the far side of the moon, they're hard to retrieve. So the group that's going to do that may or may not come back. I don't know yet. I haven't gotten that far. But they're going to set up an observation post so that with the satellite on Earth and the one on the far side of the moon, they have 3D image of the sky. Like if you cover one eye, you no longer have depth perception. It's the same sort of thing. And there's a lot of adventures because there's a lot of bad guys that keep getting in the way of everything that they do. And while they don't hurt humans, tossing somebody in the water is not going to hurt them, but they're not going to come back and attack you, especially if you toss them a fairly decent distance. Zyzie has the capability of creating a child and bringing it to life on 4 times plus the gravity of Earth. So obviously she's fairly strong. And in a fight, her favorite thing is throwing people in the water.
Okay, so you do have sort of an end game in mind. One question I have is, some time ago they had a writers' conference at St. Albans Free Library, and they had 3 people and on a panel, and they each said what their writing style is. Now, here's my question. Are you a plotter, a pantser, or a plantser? And for people who don't know what a plantser is, that's somebody who sort of knows where they're going with the plot, but they don't have that outline written down. Which are you?
I'm the kind that doesn't have an outline written down. I do my best writing at 3 to 5:30 in the morning when I wake up. And if I don't have something to write it down on, I'll forget it. But things just come into my head. So now,
so you're a pantser. You go by the seat of your pants.
Yes, and I know how it's going to end. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you know where the awesome shop is next to Applebee's in Burlington, but
no.
They already have the book cover on the wall down there.
Really?
The last one. He doesn't know it, but he's got it on the wall. And I've just picked up the copy of the second book cover from him this weekend, and he put it digitally, and that's hanging on the wall in his shop. I had a book signing down there, but it wasn't because everybody down there is hurry-scurry. It's too close to Thanksgiving. But I just enjoy the place. It's got, matter of fact, they had a picture one day I went in there of a werewolf. So I know that's going to make you smile. But and it was a very scary picture of a werewolf. It
can be.
It was good, yes. So I'm that far along on where I know where I'm going and how I'm going to get there, and what the failures are going to be. But the nitty-gritty of is by the seat of my pants. Speaking of books, you're writing a book, and several stories I know. I think for the people out there that are writing, you're a good example of how people should write. And I know we talked to somebody, I talk often on this show about somebody under great stress that took care of that problem, the anxieties and that, by writing in a book. I'm not going to mention names, but I think we both heard a very good story from the guy the other day. And I don't know if he'll ever publish it, but it seemed to really help him, don't you think?
Yes. I think writing is one of those outlets for people who have difficulty expressing themselves in the world. I know it's, for me, a really good outlet and a way of getting my ideas out in a way that I don't always feel. I'm not a very loudly spoken person, and you're not either, but it gets our ideas out.
Depends who you talk to. Yeah, yeah. I know there are some ideas in the book that you almost can't share with people. The idea of individual being an individual from conception. Now, whether they're human or not, I'll leave that up to the people to make their own decisions. But the DNA is different than the mother, and the DNA is different than the father. And that concept bothers some people, and you can't really talk about it because you'll get all sorts of harassment back. But you can put it in a book, and then they can read it and decide whether, yeah, and they can yell at the book all they want. Also, any other things that you want to express in a book, like you say, some things you just can't come out and say, and some things you may not be able to verbalize. You write it down, and then you go back. You know how you edit your own stuff, and you go back and look at it, and you say, I'm not going to put that in. Or, yeah, I better change the way I talk about it or do things. There's a lot of that in my books. Concepts and things that you just really wouldn't want to start a conversation with, but you want to just sort of brush about them. The idea of Canada being a place for refugees to go in the Civil War and before, when there was slavery, there are lots of buildings. I'm sure you know of some up here where there were railroad stations for the Underground Railroad.
Oh, yes.
And being this close to Canada, there's a tremendous number of Canadians whose ancestors were slaves that escaped thanks to Vermonters, and some northern New York people too. But you can't talk about that so much, sometimes without offending people, but later on in the book, the hybrids are in the same situation. They're either going to be slaves to the humans, or they're going to escape into the wilderness of the north. And I can't approach that correctly talking to somebody, but in the book, I used the book to great advantage of what would happen if humans had 4 hands, but they weren't considered humans, because other times the Egyptians didn't consider the Jewish people humans, and it's happened many times in many cultures where one culture doesn't believe the other is actually a human. Just ask the original Americans.
Yes.
And it's hard to approach, but writing, you can approach it easily. And you're in this, of your book that I've heard when you read it, there are creatures in there that aren't considered humans, but they are considered humans, and they are actually humans, but they just convert into something else.
Exactly.
When the moon is full, I'll word it that way, but that's not really how that goes. And I think anybody writing a book, anybody that has strong feelings can write it in fiction. I've read other people's fiction, and the Sir Isaac Asimov was a great one for doing what ifs with things happening.
Yes.
And he was one of my inspirations.
Those are sometimes what people term alternative history books are the best to read, because there's this humongous what if.
Yes.
It's a plausible possibility if one very small thing changed. Harry Turtledove did a series where a group of people went back in time and gave the Confederacy AK-47s.
That made a difference.
That made a huge difference.
I mean, they had Gatling guns, but that's not the same as an
No,
AK-47.
it's not the same as an AK-47.
The biggest scare, I think, in my era, was the thought of 2 or 3 million human beings with AK-47s charging into Europe, even without tanks or anything like that, just charging in. It was right after Mao Zedong, and I think we found out that we had good reason to think that when the Korean War turned around for them. That, yeah, in the Confederate times, it just would have made a huge,
Yes.
massive difference.
And it would have changed history, and there again, it's a plausible possibility, which is something Zyzie kind of puts out there as, you know, a plausible possibility. You can't have children carry a child for whatever reason or have children. Well, let's do this.
Yep, $50,000 a pop.
Ouch.
Well, it's not ouch for somebody that's rich and can't have children.
But for somebody who is not rich, that's...
Yeah, that's what was way out of the
Exactly.
realm. You're right, and then like Star Trek. Star Trek was a lot of good and visual effects, but a lot of times in Star Trek they did the same thing. They said they did the what if, you know.
Yes.
And they could use various planets for that. If
Yes. I remember when I was reading the First Book of Zyzie, I kept flashing to the old Planet of the Apes
yes,
visual, because I'm a very, you know, when I read a book, it kind of turns into a movie in my head.
oh,
And I kept envisioning the, at the time, god-awful, even though it was very state-of-the-art at the time, makeup for these creatures, these characters, and thinking, you know, and envisioning a woman with an orangutan's
Yeah.
face.
well, was the minister, the religious people were orangutans that
You know,
sort of
it's
humanish?
been so long. The last time I did a marathon
long
was a
ago.
long time ago.
I remember this particular one because of I was always a religious person, and I scrutinized them because they were doing things in a certain way, and just sort of juxtapositioning it with what I've always been taught. And you always start out with what you've been taught, and then
And
come
go
up with
from
your own
there.
beliefs later, right? You know, it's. Hitler was a great one at that. They take the Hitler Youth. I met a couple of them when I was in high school that came over from Germany, because I'm that old. It was right after the war. And the positive things that happened were they were highly taught. You might sass your teacher in America, but you didn't sass your teacher back then. Yeah, you would regret it highly. And these two 7th and 8th graders had educations higher than high school, and that was real. That wasn't, but that sort of a thing was expressed in Star Trek several times. You can, if you studied 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then from there you went into physical training like basketball. A person could get pretty intelligent with their normal mental activities, not more than you would nowadays. We got about 4 minutes left. So you have any good questions for me?
Not really.
I was afraid you'd say that.
You have, you know, you've said that you have a sort of a background in science fiction. It was it's been an interest for years. What do you say to people that look at this book and say, it's ridiculous, it's silly? We have some people like that in writers group.
Oh yeah.
Science fiction, oh no.
I say to them, if you like adventure, because this is filled with adventure. I have motorcycle chases, I have chases through the woods, I have knife fights, I have being chased by wolves, and you name it in there. And so forget that it's science fiction, just enjoy it for the adventure, because I wanted to be sure the adventure was there, you know. And that's what I'd say to them. I'd say, okay, read it. Don't think of it as science fiction, think of it as an adventure. Forget that the main character is not human, because she acts human. You should be able to find personality in the book of somebody you know. I don't care who you are. You should be able to find a personality in there that sounds familiar. And
whether you like that personality
yeah, you may
or
not like that person. One of the main characters is somebody that I would dislike intensely. But I wrote them as a good thing. And they started, like a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people that started out bad and then turned good. Now we got about, just about 2 minutes left. So I guess we better wind this thing up. So did you get any reading of the new book?
No.
Okay. Well, we will cure that.
Uh-oh.
Because you've been so nice to be on the show, I brought a book just for you, and it's hardcover. And I have never given a hardcover away to anybody. So right in front of this whole crew, it's to Anna, U-N-N-A. Thank you. I'll write a little more after they get me out there, but this is going to be yours because you were so nice, and I know interviewing somebody can be hard, even if you're used to it a little bit, and you did an exceptionally good job. And I hope you do look at my book. It should be in some of the libraries or on Barnes & Noble and all that sort of stuff, but I hope you enjoyed this show, and I hope you write a book yourself, because it's a very, very good thing to do. Very good stress reliever. Thank you very much, and we'll wrap this up. And you folks, thank you, and have a great day.